Kaguya-Sama, Love is War. A charming, energetic, emotionally charged romantic comedy capable of pivoting between pitch-perfect, pitch-black humor and sappy, heartwarming romance on a dime. And that was just the first season. Season 2 has amplified all of these traits with even more subtly crafted Sakuga, even more convoluted mind games, even more adorable Kaguya blushes, and even more Chika noises. Almost every otaku out there can agree that this show is a delight, and that this season in particular is particularly delightful. Perhaps even anime of the year material. It's one of a few bright spots in an otherwise bleak season beset by delays and cancellations. However, even within this rare consensus, there is still division and discord, all stemming from a single seemingly innocuous question that anime fans can't help but ask, no matter how many times we see it end in bloodshed. Yeah, the show's good and all, but who do you think is best girl? If you were to ask the student council members that question, they'd all have very different answers. Shirogane would agonize trying to find a way to say it's Kaguya without actually saying it's Kaguya, while Kaguya would immediately point to his younger sister, Kei. Yu Ishigami would do his best to avoid answering out of fear for his own safety, only to end up digging himself a much deeper hole in the process, and Chika Fujiwara would say, Chika Fujiwara. Chika likes to think of herself as a bubbly, energetic ray of sunshine, brightening the day of everyone she passes by. Her friends see her more as an erratically aimed death ray, setting their carefully laid plans alight whenever she randomly comes near them. The truth lies somewhere in the middle, but I can see where Chika's coming from. Sure, she can be petulant, self-indulgent, temperamental, immature, and incapable of reading the subtle Machiavellian atmosphere of the student council room, but she's also, really cute, and she's always there for her friends when it really matters. She may have made some disapproving noises upon witnessing the creature known as Miyuki Shirogane's pathetic display on the volleyball court, and what noises they were. But after that, she actually stuck around for him, spending every second of her own free time for over a week helping that creature evolve into something resembling a real human being. And she does it again, multiple times, despite knowing the hell she's about to put herself through. That's just the kind of person Chika is. She'll never turn her back on a friend in need. Unless you, offer her a bit of food to do it, or just stroke her ego a little. There are a lot of words you could use to describe Chika. Consistent isn't one of them. But that unpredictable impulsivity does make her a very fun character to watch. Doubly so in this new season, where a liberal application of Sakuga has turned her into a full-blown Looney Tune. That said, despite her often outlandish behavior, Chika's probably the only member of the student council with a modicum of common sense. Even with her total lack of romantic experience, Love Detective Chika gives the best romantic advice out of anybody else in the room by simple virtue of not being a complete dumbass about it.
彼が彼女と手をつなぐにはどうしたらいいかと。
え、普通につなげばいいじゃないですか。
Actually, Chika can be pretty damn smart when she wants to be. Not only is she a polyglot and a prodigious pianist, she's even better at manipulating people than the show's protagonists, given the right motivation, that is. She's honest to a fault most of the time. She'll only lie when she's being playful, but when she does play, she plays for fucking keeps. She's not great at cheating. She always seems to get caught, but when it comes to bluffing, she is second to none. During the banned word game, for instance, she immediately zeroes in on Kaguya's biggest gripe with her, her inability to read a room, then reframes it as something she's deeply insecure about in order to play to her friend's strong sense of kindness and guilt. And she goes all in on the deception in a way that prompts the overly serious president to declare his intent to win, thereby causing him to lose too. In a show about psychological warfare, that is the only psychological scheme I've ever seen go off without a hitch. Chika could absolutely play mind games with the best, or maybe I should say worst of them, but she doesn't, out of principle. Except when it would be really funny. As much as the student council are her beloved friends, they're also her main source of entertainment, and Chika really likes to be entertained. Fun is just about the only thing you can count on her to take seriously. There are many fundamental contradictions to Chika's character because she is a fundamentally chaotic person. Also, a deeply egotistical one, just not in the same obvious way as the prideful president and vice president. She does genuinely love her friends, but it really seems like her main motivation for being nice and putting them first is the self-satisfaction of feeling like she's the great person she thinks she is. She is still genuinely helpful, but her help often comes with an air of passive-aggressive condescension. Still, that's better than aggressive aggression. Chika's normally calm and sweet, but when she gets angry, she gets really angry, and God help any Ishigamis who happen to be nearby when that happens. Even when she isn't straight up violent, she can be particularly brutal with that honesty I mentioned. As a person, yeah, she's not the best, but that doesn't necessarily disqualify her from being the best waifu. In fact, if you've seen my analysis of the best worst girls of Konosuba, you'll know that these kinds of deep character flaws can even work in a waifu's favor. And that's exactly what I think is happening here. Even at her most awful, Chika tends to be adorably awful, like a toddler. Her one consistent trait is her innocent cuteness. But even there, we find a contradiction, because you see, Chika is a bit of a freaka. Despite generally not getting the more nuanced points of many conversations, Chika immediately picks up any innuendo her friends put down, no matter how subtle it may be, often having to explain it afterwards to the genuinely pure and naive Kaguya. She clearly thinks about this stuff a lot, even though she's a nice girl from a respectable political family who wouldn't ever. And in the manga, when she sits down to indulge in some saucy shoujo with Kaguya, we get a brief and tantalizing glimpse at what's really going on under that ribbon that leaves little doubt as to where her priorities lie. Chika's obsession with love is probably, at least in part, a socially acceptable expression of this ravenous thirst, but she needn't bother with the cover story because her sisters put her relative lack of shame to shame. College-age Toyomi Fujiwara fucks, and she wants everyone to know it. And as for the younger Moeha, she's like 12 political scandals waiting to happen all at once.
一生力に閉じ込めて可愛がってあげたい感じ。あ、もちろんかぐやちゃんも大好きですよ。萌葉の大好きランキング食べちゃいたい部門1位ですから。怖い。
Looking at them, it's kind of a miracle that Chika's as normal as she is. And weird as this may sound, I think normal is kinda the best word to describe her. When she's first introduced, Chika seems like a quirky, cheerful, impossibly adorable moe blob with big anime titty, albeit a very fun take on that tired archetype. Then they drop that special ED and how could anyone see that and not instantly conclude that she's a superior 2D being, the best girl to end all best girls? We're only human. But the thing is, so is Chika. She's a human who's pretty good at acting cute, but only because she likes others to see her that way. She's got some weird-ass hobbies and interests, but then who doesn't? She can be absolutely brilliant when she applies herself, and she's a friend you can really count on when you really need her, but when you don't, she'll put herself first in a heartbeat and maybe fuck with you just for the entertainment value. Chika seems strange and incomprehensible because we mainly see her through the eyes of Kaguya and Shirogane, two deeply messed up individuals obsessed with each other and their own perfect self-images. Chika doesn't care about being perfect. She just wants to be happy. She's a normal, flawed, complex girl, but a fundamentally good and likable one where it really counts. With big anime titty. Also, like many of the all-time great waifus, Chika is an anarchist.
誰もが立ち向かわなきゃならない強大な敵はいます。この社会です。社会。
I think all that makes for a very strong argument to let her keep her default best girl status, but I wouldn't count Kaguya out just yet. Before we move on to her, though, let me quickly tell you about today's sponsor, ExpressVPN. Say, hypothetically, that you're trying to get your secret crush to pay more attention to you. You go check out their blog to find out what manga they're into, then you grab the latest volume of their favorite series so it can casually fall out of your backpack the next time they're around. But wait! Their blog logged your IP address, and now you've just dropped evidence of your interest in front of them.
Were you trying to start a conversation with me over Mob Psycho 100? How cute!
Humiliation! Despair! If only you'd gone to expressvpn.com/basement and used one of their VPN servers in 94 different countries to keep your browsing anonymous. Also, that helps protect you from hackers and other ne'er-do-wells online and keeps your browsing habits hidden from your ISP and other companies who want to harvest your data, which I guess is probably a lot more useful to the vast majority of people who aren't the main characters of this specific anime, but I'm committed to the bit now. So in another Kaguya-Sama reference, if social distancing has depleted your streaming media library, ExpressVPN can expand it exponentially by allowing you to bypass region locks and watch content from anywhere in the world. Living as I do in the frozen tundras of Canada, I find myself doing that on a near daily basis to watch US exclusive content, and ExpressVPN lets me access that content at consistently faster speeds than any of its competitors. To see for yourself why ExpressVPN is widely regarded as the best VPN on the market and find out how you can get 3 months of service free, head to expressvpn.com/basement today. If Chika's a deceptively simple character, then Kaguya is a deceptively complicated one. We spend a lot of the series inside her head, getting wrapped up in her conflicting desires and convoluted schemes. Before you get to know Chika, it's easy to identify what her initial appeal is supposed to be. She's sold as a Genki girl, pure dere-dere. Kaguya's a lot harder to initially pigeonhole. Given the way she schemes and obsesses and her cold, predatory glare, it's tempting to peg her as a yandere, but that doesn't quite line up. She certainly goes to excessive, some might say crazy lengths in pursuit of her crush, but that's more a product of her upbringing than any deep-seated instability. The Shinomiya fortune was built on exploitation, theft, and the rejection of love. It's literally their family motto. Her dad raised her from afar, having his servants spy on and manipulate her, so it's only natural that she'd do the same to the guy she's obsessed with. Her most obviously yandere-ish trait, besides that obsession, is the way she covers the cold, calculating intent of her inner monologue, but the key distinction is that cold, emotionless calculation is also a mask, an internal one that she uses to protect herself from the emotional effects of her family's control and neglect. The so-called Ice Queen Kaguya is an intellectual construct built from the twisted morals and ethics she was raised on. In Kaguya's internal courtroom, she sits behind the superego's bench. And that's fundamentally the opposite of a yandere. Characters like Yuno Gasai and Himiko Toga are defined by a tempestuous id screaming "fuck, marry, kill" as it inevitably overtakes a fraying superego built on suffocating Japanese social norms. Norms that are almost completely alien to the sheltered, rich Kaguya. Kaguya's id is a sweet, caring, good-natured moron who just wants the president to smile and wear cat ears sometimes and also cuddle up real close and give her smooches, and maybe do some other stuff once she's able to actually think about it without breaking down laughing. With a cold, aggressive mask over a warm, caring core, Kaguya better fits the template of a tsundere than a yandere, but she's not exactly a conventional tsundere either. We do see her have emotional outbursts, but only because we're privy to her internal narration. Rarely, if ever, do they actually break through the surface. Kaguya's far too elegant and composed to hit the president or call him bababaka when she's flustered, or to lash out at him or Chika when a misunderstanding riles up her jealousy. That's not how Shinomiyas process their anger. Instead, when she's mad, she files that feeling away for later, smiles a little too sweetly, and then, if nothing is done to resolve it by the end of the conversation, begins using her wealth and connections to meticulously destroy the fool who dared to cross her. Luckily, for them, Shirogane is too nice to hurt her without making it up to her, Chika's too chaotic to stay mad at for long, and Ishigami knows his place. But I'm drifting away from the point, which is that Kaguya, like the real Chika, is far too complicated to neatly fit your standard dere template. All of the show's characters are, out of necessity. Without those layers of depth to explore, its brand of psychological comedy would get old fast. Unfortunately, that leaves me in a slightly tricky spot as a waifuologist. The Dere taxonomy is the foundation of this entire field of research. Without those easy points of generalized reference, expressing what makes a waifu appealing requires fully understanding her character. And if I was good at that, I wouldn't be working in STEM. But it's inescapable here, because it's exactly that slow process of getting to know Kaguya that makes her such a phenomenal waifu, and makes the initially easy best girl question so difficult to answer the further you get into the anime, and especially the manga. My first impression of Kaguya was that she kinda sucked. Early on, she comes off as cold and condescending, needlessly distrusting and hostile. The antics that ensue as a result of this are immensely entertaining, but they don't give her much innate character appeal beyond looking cute when her composure breaks down. It was only once I realized that she sees herself much the same way I did, and that she doesn't particularly like it, that I really started to warm up to her and second guess my waifu rankings. For a long time, I thought that Kaguya's ego was running the show, but her ego is barely developed. In her head, it's literally depicted as a child. She worries about appearances so much because that's what's expected of her as a shinomiya. The family's identity has always taken precedence over her own. What really drives Kaguya is a very straightforward need for affection, kindness, and validation. And in the moments where she actually gets what she wants, especially when it's from the man she's too scared to admit she loves, oh my gosh, she's so fucking cute, you guys! Sorry, I wish I could be more analytical about it, but there's these moments where her internal screaming over the president completely overwhelms the logical part of her brain, and seeing that does pretty much the exact same thing to mine.
何を言うんでしたっけ？会長、センス使ってくれてありがとう。違う、絶対それじゃない！
なんだ篠宮のやつ急にもごついて。
Her feelings cost her the decisive self-confidence that's won her so much success in academics, sports, and every other field, but that happens to all of us when we're out of our element and when we care about something enough to fear losing it to a bad decision, which happens to be the exact state of mind furthest from Kaguya's element. The only advice her family ever gave her on how to love someone is don't. What's really brilliant about Kaguya as a character is the fact that her cold, detached, manipulative persona and the meek, gentle, compassionate shadow hiding behind it are both born from the exact same source. Kaguya's strict, arguably abusive upbringing, built on a selfish and misanthropic view of humanity, was meant to accelerate her growth into the kind of ruthless adult who could command the Shinomiya family. And it did teach her how to act that way, but it also sheltered her from the negative life experiences that would lead someone to become that jaded deep down. Intellectually, Kaguya understands that people can be awful and that there's good reason to guard herself from others, but in terms of emotional experience, she's felt far more kindness than cruelty in the small amount of time she's spent outside her own household. And the president's kindness in particular has touched the sheltered, naive innocent deep inside her, who values kindness and compassion above all else and pines for true love. The most exquisite moe, gap moe, is born from surprising deviations in a waifu's expected behavior. The bigger the gap between expectation and reality, the more profound the effect. And Kaguya's moe is built on the greatest gap imaginable, the one between the character of the wealthy and basic inborn human kindness. It is genuinely heartwarming to see how pure, simple love draws Kaguya out of her shell and gradually coaxes her to become a better, more honest, and trusting person. Very, very gradually. Still, the wait is so worth it, both through the first season of the anime and Kaguya's larger arc through the manga so far. As layers upon layers of deception and self-deception are stripped away, eventually all that's left is a pure, delicate smile that must be protected at all costs. The very essence of moe, packaged up in a character complex and interesting enough to make that seemingly unrealistic ideal feel grounded and believable. It also feels special because it's a rarely seen side of her. When Kaguya does typical cute anime girl things, it just hits a lot harder than anime or manga that have their waifus start there. It's the difference between enjoying a sweet dessert at the end of a hearty meal and binging a whole tub of ice cream by itself. And in one way or another, that's true of all the series waifus. Not just Chika and Kaguya, but also Kei, Ino, Tsubame, Ishigami, Kashiwagi, Maki, and of course, Ai Hayasaka. I was actually planning to talk about her in this video as well, as the only person in the world who can call Kaguya on her shit, and the direct inverse of the bubbly, shameless Chika. Hayasaka makes a great compliment to the both of them, but when I actually started analyzing their characters, I found my hands were way too full to add another waifu to the mix. There is a shocking amount of depth and nuance to Kaguya-Sama's character writing, which means that all of its waifus are top tier in their own way. Were they alone in almost any other anime, both Chika and Kaguya could claim the best girl crown with little contest. But against each other, and the rest of the cast, it's almost impossible to say who deserves it more. So I won't, for now. Instead, I'll leave it to all of you with the poll that just popped up in the top right corner of the video. Don't worry, we'll be giving the other candidates their due in due time, after I've made those Hiraka videos I promised you guys back in the fall, and I'll be drawing my own conclusions based on rigorous scientific analysis, eventually. Right now, I'm just curious to know where you guys are at on this thorny, contentious issue. On that note, this video was a much more complex undertaking to write than previous What's in a Waifus on account of how much more complex these waifus are, so I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments as to how it stacks up to previous videos in this series, and while you're down there, if you haven't already, please consider clicking the subscribe button and joining the now million-strong army of basement dwellers. I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.